Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Tales with TR episode 229B. I'm your host, Terry Ryan Jr., and let's get right at it. My next guest is a familiar face to even the most casual hockey fan as a broadcaster, analyst, journalist, coach, writer, scout, executive. In the early 90s, he won 2 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins as a scout, then assistant coach. Ever since has been a major contributor to our great game in one way or another, mostly behind a camera, behind a mic, for multiple networks in multiple roles. These days, he can also be heard on the Sick Podcast with co-host Jimmy Murphy. He is a bodacious broadcaster, jazzy journalist, a tantalizing talker, a sensational scout. Unlike Sean Dursey, he was born in New Jersey. As I can recall, he spent time in Montreal. In high school, he grew and played not one sport but 2. No, he wasn't a jockey. It was football and hockey. He figured what the hell and became a pitcher as well. Then, without pouting, he started coaching and scouting. Wouldn't you say? He won a cup right away. He loves the game and added broadcasting to his name. He paved his own way and still does it to this day. Folks, he's always tuned in and loves to inquire. Please welcome to the show. It's Pierre McGuire. Pierre, how the hell are you doing?
I'm doing, Terry. What an amazing intro. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Coming from you, it means a lot to me. Thank you very much. It's awesome to be with you. Really good.
Hey, no sweat. It's good to have you, and you deserve an intro like that. And I hope I didn't screw up there because I know it's famously spoken about how you got in on the second Stanley Cup. Were you there for a scout for the first one, right?
Well, the first one I actually played a pretty significant role. I did all the advanced scouting and ran all the team meetings as we did the prep before each series.
Okay, I hear this. And was there any analytics back then? Like, were
no, everything was the eye test. Now,
okay.
Did we know what other teams' power play was? Yes. Did we know what their penalty kill was? Yes. Did we know their face-off percentages? Yes. Did we know whether they outshot teams or were outshot by teams? The answer is yes. We knew all that stuff, if that's what you want to call analytics. But truly, one of the best lines we had, I won't say which coach said it, but I'll never forget being in a meeting, and he said, statistics are for losers. There's only one stat that matters. It's winning.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Well, it just analytics is information, really. So, like, it does, I think, get out of hand, especially when you watch baseball and stuff, and they're like, well, he hasn't hit a homer on a Tuesday in October since so-and-so, and I'm like, God, some of this doesn't make sense. But I get, like, when I played, I don't even remember, maybe they did, but did they track our hitting? I remember Bob Laux, our coach in junior, giving someone a pad and paper. Can you count the face-offs and count the hits? Because no one else is going to do that. What an odd thing for people not to count hits.
Yeah, no. Well, they did start counting hits. I know we did. We were really bullish on face-offs. We were one of the first teams in Pittsburgh, those really good Pittsburgh teams, Terry, that actually utilized video a lot. And it's a good story for you. Barry Peterson that does such a good job with the Bruins now on their in-between period show and their pre- and post-game show. I remember once Barry was right at the end of his career, and he came up to me after one of our video sessions, and he said, Pierre, you know what? This is really good, but this is going to destroy the game because it's going to turn us all into robots. And you know what? He wasn't half wrong. He was not half wrong. I'm telling you, it made a lot of sense. And so I always appreciated Barry sharing that with me, and it's something I never forgot. You don't want to over-prepare the players. Allow the players to play the game. And I think that's something that has kind of been forgotten because of all the analytics and all the video and everything else.
I mean, I think there is a happy medium. And look, I got to ask you, while we're slightly on that topic, I want to go back because you got an interesting upbringing, but I want to know a little bit about that. And then, before we're done, just some questions about the current state of the game. But I got to know because it's probably to a lot of people sacrilege to say that Gretzky's not the best. And I really don't know. I hate to compare greatness. I didn't see Bobby Orr with my own eyes. I saw Gretzky and Lemieux, and Gretzky was at the end, and Lemieux was close. But I really hate to compare greatness. But what I saw with my own eyes, I played a game in Montreal. I didn't get one shift. I sat on the bench. It's all good. There was someone injured. I knew I was going back to junior. It was my 19-year-old year. And it was Lemieux was back for like his swan song, his last game. But he ended up playing longer. But in Montreal, people thought that it was his last game, and he had 4 goals. And I knew how hurt his back was because I knew people around the league. And, you ask questions about the best players. And before social media, people were on the phone a lot. Like, there's one thing. I know we're more connected, but the intimate connections back then were something to be said. So after games, you'd go, hey, man, do you know anybody on the other team want to go over? So I went over peckishly, sheepishly, and asked Mario for his stick. And he gave me a stick. and he gave me a few pointers, and he acted interested. He was only humoring me. He said, "I love Newfoundland," and he's a really nice guy, but I was intimidated, and I couldn't believe watching him play. The patience that he had, and maybe it was just that night, but I'd never seen anything as graceful in my life. And I was 10 years old when he scored the big goal in '87 for Canada Cup, and he comes on the scene with those cups right before I met him. He was godlike, and when I left, I don't want to mention the times that I've met a hero and it hasn't turned out the way I wanted it to. Other than Red Fisher, I couldn't believe that one. He treated me really ignorant. I knew everything about him. I was a huge Red Fisher fan, but he didn't know that. But anyway, Mario was unreal. Now, what was it? You come in, we'll get into your background a little bit, but you're fairly new to the game professionally, and now you're dealing with one of the best players and one of the best teams, which is people don't talk about a lot, of all time. Was that intimidating? How did you go about it, and how did Mario Lemieux treat you?
What a good question. First of all, I think Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, and Mario Lemieux are the three best players of all time. And I mean no disrespect to Gordie Howe, to Jean Beliveau, or any of those other great players that were before them. But I had a chance to watch all three play live. I coached one. I coached against the other one, Gretzky, obviously. And now you look at this new wave of player, whether it's Sidney Crosby, whether it's Connor McDavid, whether it's Nathan McKinnon. I mean, there's so many great players. It's unbelievable. But the part of that is because of expansion, too, and how much hockey has grown worldwide, not just in North America. But in terms of dealing with the pressure, we had a murderer's row of players. And I was young. When I got hired in Pittsburgh, I was 28 years old. I had coached a lot in college, and we had a lot of successful teams and some very good players. And I remember Bob Johnson, who was my boss, along with Scotty Bowman and Craig Patrick, saying, "Want you to go out and do advanced scouting for us during the regular season, not just amateur scouting, but pro as well, and then file reports." So I used to file these long handwritten reports, Terry, because there were no computers back then. There were no personal computers.
Yeah.
So I used to write, and then I would go to a fax machine in a hotel lobby and fax them back to Pittsburgh to a young lady by the name of Michelle Coliani. And Michelle would get the reports and then bring them and put them on Bob Johnson's desk. And remember, there were no cell phones. So I was on the road. I forget if I was in Richmond, Virginia, watching an exhibition game, or if I was in Albany, New York. I was in one of the two places, I forget. And I get a call, and it's from Bob Johnson, who's the head coach in Pittsburgh. And he says, "Here are our first 5 opponents, and I want you to go out and file these same reports on the first 5 opponents, because this information is valuable to us. This is how we want to run our team and change the culture in Pittsburgh." So I started doing that. And all of a sudden, it was like I was an extension of the coaching staff. And I would be going to Europe a lot to scout, but then I'd come back and do NHL games. Or I'd go to the Western Hockey League, and then I'd watch Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, to get NHL information. And once the playoffs started, I'll never forget Badger calling me up and saying, "Look, we're going to play the New Jersey Devils in the first round, but our last game is in New York. I want you to watch New Jersey." They were playing earlier in the day. "Fly back on the charter with the team, and then the next day you're going to prepare the team for the first round of the playoffs against New Jersey." And that's how it basically started for me.
Wow. Now, this guy's not talked about enough. This guy, Bob Johnson. Now, I've never met the guy, and now I won't have a chance to, sadly. But what kind of a guy was he? Because he's a legend in those private. I think he's a legend overall. And as we get further and further into the 2020s, and there's a lot of legendary names that don't get brought up, and Roger Nielsen's another one.
Yeah.
And I try to tell people I came in just at the end of all that, but I still played senior hockey till a couple of years. I played a game, as you know, last year on the Growlers. So I talked to a lot of and a lot of people wouldn't even know his name. So tell us the importance of Bob and Pittsburgh and hockey in general.
Bob was an innovator. He was a tremendous coach. He was a legendary coach at Colorado College. Then he went to the University of Wisconsin. That's how he got the nickname Badger Bob. And his son, obviously, Mark Johnson, legendary Olympic figure from the 1980 Olympic scene. But Mark was always a really good player as well at Wisconsin, and then eventually in the NHL with numerous teams, New Jersey, Hartford, Pittsburgh. Mark was a really good player, very, very talented. And Bob played a big role in that. But everywhere Bob went, he always had his wife, Martha, with him. And Martha just passed away recently. Last time I saw her was actually in Madison, Wisconsin. I had just spoken to Mark Johnson's University of Wisconsin Women Badgers hockey team. He's a coach there. He is without a doubt the best female coach in U.S. college hockey. Mark is. He's unbelievable. His teams are fantastic. So, anyways, long story short, Bob an innovator. Bob was a communicator. Bob was the king, Terry, of positivity. I've never met a man more positive in my life. You could lose a game 8-0. And he'd say, you know what was really good about our team tonight? Our penalty killing was a perfect 6 for 6, even though you lose 8-0. Or, you could win a game 5-1. And he'd say, I like this, I like this, I like this. Well, is there anything you didn't like? No, I didn't. I liked everything, even though there's a lot of stuff he didn't like. He was the king of positivity. He really was.
That's great to hear, because a lot of people lump all coaches from that era together. Like, not everybody was Iron Mike, and it worked for Iron Mike here. Like, players are different, coaches are different, and a lot of them get just painted with the same brush. I love to hear that he was positive like that. Again, because at the time there was a trend of, I guess, soldier, like, I don't want to say a dictator. I didn't like Michel Therrien, but other than that, there were people that did that well, and but there were also coaches. There were John Coopers back in the day as well. It's good to hear. Now, I got to get into it, because most things, you're out there so much and connected with the game. I mean, I remember knowing all about you when I played in Montreal. I believe you were doing some radio there at the time, like late 90s. But you've got a really interesting start. So you're born in New Jersey, go back to Montreal, back to Jersey, right? Like, you went to Montreal for some formative childhood years?
My mom's from Quebec. My dad was from North Dakota. My father started a business in Montreal. When I was really young, we moved from New Jersey to Montreal. I grew up in Montreal. The only reason I ended up back in the States is just because of football. There's a really prominent high school in Bergen County, New Jersey, called Bergen Catholic High School. And for your viewers and listeners, you can go look it up. It's an unbelievable athletic factory. It's a great academic institution too, but it's a great athletic factory. And I was pretty good in a few sports, and my dad said, you should go challenge yourself. And I left home to go there. And I'll never forget the first day of training camp in football. I called my dad up. I go, what did you do this to me for? I can't swing with these guys. They're way better than me. He goes, hang in there. You'll be fine. And eventually I ended up being the starting quarterback there of a team that went to 2 state championship games. We lost both of them, but that was really the start of where Bergen Catholic football really is. And now it's considered one of the top 10 programs in all the United States. It's a phenomenal program.
I looked at that, and that's what I was iffy on. And I normally like to, I don't like to go by Wikipedia. Can often be wrong, or it doesn't explain a lot. But that part I did not know. So you must have played football then in Montreal.
I did. I went to Lower Canada College in Montreal. I played football there.
And hockey and baseball?
I had baseball in town of Mount Royal, hockey and football at Lower Canada,
Interesting. So look, you go there, and you had a successful varsity college career. I don't know anything about this Netherlands here, but at some point here, you're a great athlete. Like, you must have, I guess, tell us about Netherlands first. How'd you make the decision to go there?
Well, I had chances to go to a bunch of different places in Europe. Back then, people forget that Holland was actually an Olympic country. They played in the 1980 Olympics. And they were actually very representative. And part of that is because there were so many Dutch Canadians that were playing over there at the time. Guys that had played in the American Hockey League, some guys that had a cup of coffee in the NHL. And so the league was actually really strong and had really solid ownership too. The crowds were tremendous. If you went into Nijmegen, or you went into Amsterdam, or if you went into Geleen, you went up to Heerenveen, Groningen, all these different towns in Holland. The hockey was good, and the league was really good. And then, believe it or not, I got approached to go and sign with New Jersey. So I went to New Jersey when I was done playing there that year, and went to training camp and got sent to the minors. And I said, you know what, I'm either going to go back to Europe or I'm going to start coaching. And that's what I did. Back then, it wasn't nearly as economic friendly to go to the minors as it is now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and that's interesting, though. I often say to buddies, I at the time playing junior, or people coming out now, I don't like to give advice, but because everybody got a different path. But I love to see when people, like, at least give it go out, play 1 year, see the world.
Yep.
You can have so many experiences. Now, little did you know what was in store for you.
No, I had no idea.
I mean, so you go to Jersey camp. Now, there must have been some crossroads that you said, okay, because, I mean, you're an athlete now in your early 20s, and you made a decision. Did that decision, was that because, okay, I'm going to get my life started, because I just don't see pro happening here, and I don't want to make, chump change in the minors, because it really, I mean, that's why my dad stopped. He tells me, he's like, I said, why did you become a teacher at 25? Like, what were you doing? He's like, I said, like 100 points in the eye. My dad had the shorthanded goal record played 1 year in the WHA, and he said, well, I didn't do it for that. I did it so I get my degree. So there wasn't a whole lot of money in the minors, and he goes, even up there in Minnesota, I was making like 4,000 more than I was as a teacher. And I go, wow, I never thought about it like that. So for yourself, was it, I'm going to get something on the go, or were you so passionate about coaching and hockey scouting, broadcasting, one of those things that you said, okay, now I'm going to get a head start on this, or did it all just happen?
The combination of things. One, I've always told this story at a lot of different banquets or different messaging that I do with people. I remember we played in Philadelphia. It was a really good game. I think we went in overtime, if I remember. And, I had done pretty well in the game. And I remember Marshall Johnston, who at the time was director of player personnel for New Jersey. Max McNabb was a general manager. And Marshall said, hey, can I see you? And this was the next day. And he said, really happy with your camp. You've done really well. He says, we see you as being a minor league player. We don't see you being a guy that's going to get an opportunity to play very much or at all in the NHL. And he says, why don't you think about it? And if you want to stay, we'd love to put you with one of our farm teams. If not, we don't see you being part of the NHL. And I said, well, I really appreciate your honesty. And I called a friend of mine who's passed away now, Jim Ellingwood, who is a really long-time college coach. I used to work a lot of hockey camps with him. I said, hey, coach, I have a question for you. If I were to come out now and start coaching, do you think I can get a job? He said, I can get you a job tomorrow. And so I called up Marshall Johnson. I said, can I meet with him? I met with him, and I said, I'm going to check out, and I'm going to go. It was right at the end of camp, too, and I said, I'm going to go start coaching. He goes, hey, I'm really happy for you. If there's anything I can ever do for you, let me know. And Marsh, to this day, has always, every time I've seen him, been an unbelievable gentleman to me. So I was really grateful. But that's when I started my coaching path.
Wow. Now, okay, that's when you started. Now, you come in within a few years, you've got a couple of Stanley Cup rings. Now, from there, did you see broadcasting in your future? And, I guess by extension, I'm thinking that's what I think of you as. And I know that when I would have met you the first time, I think it was in the late 90s, like 97, 98.
It was.
Yeah, right around there, right? So in 96, 97, I didn't realize you coached Baton Rouge Kingfish in the ECHL. I had no idea until I looked, and I was like, wow, that must have been just the year before. So did you coach that year and said, you know what, I have an opportunity in Montreal, I'm going to go there and start doing radio and TV, I think, or did you just say, you know what, I don't think I want to be a coach, or was it a combination?
What a good question, too. I like that one, too, Terry. So the genesis of that is I coached there because Mike Keenan and Bob Berry were running St. Louis at the time, and that was a part of the St. Louis Blues organization. And Mike was great. He and I had coached against each other in the Stanley Cup final in 92. I knew him really well. I knew Bob because Bob was from Montreal and maybe one of the best athletes that ever came out of the city of Montreal. Bob Berry was an amazing athlete. Football, hockey, and baseball in town of Mount Royal. In fact, I still think the most valuable player in the hockey league there in TMR is called the Bob Berry Award winner. I think it still exists. Bob was just that good an athlete. So I had so much respect for he and Mike. And when they asked me to go down there and do that, I said 100%. So I did. And then all of a sudden, at the end of that year, I got a call from the Calgary Flames, and it was Nick Polano. And Nick said, look, we're a little short on the pro scouting side of things. Would you go out and scout free agents for us this playoff season? And so for 60 days, I was never home. I went out and scouted all over. I could have been in Vegas where they used to have an IHL team one night, or I could be in LA doing a playoff game another night. I traveled for a full 60 days. And at the end of it, I kept filing these reports, and Nick was great. And he said, we really want to hire you here in Calgary. I'm like, wow, that's great. And I think right around that time, I got a call from Ted Blackman in Montreal, who's a legendary broadcast person. He's passed away, but an iconic personality and a very, very strong evaluator of broadcast talent. And he said, look, we have some tapes that we have from when you were coaching Hartford, when you were an assistant at Pittsburgh, when you were working in Ottawa. And we really like what you said. We think you could be a good broadcaster. We're making changes with our radio broadcast team with the Canadiens. Would you be interested? I said, I never thought of it. Never thought of it.
Wow. Another.
So I talked to my late father. I talked to my mom, talked to my brothers. And they're like, hey, if you want to do it, try it. It gets you back in the NHL. So I
Wow.
did it. And Ted told me after the first year, he goes, we're only going to be able to keep you another year. I'm like, you told me I could have this job forever. And he said, no, it's not that we're letting you go. He says, we think you're going to get hired by a major national broadcast arm. So I'm like, okay. And then the next year, in the summertime, I got hired by TSN right around the Australia Summer Olympics, the Sydney Summer Olympics. And we had a 3-month-old daughter at the time. My wife and I moved to Toronto with this little tiny baby. It was pretty funny, but that really helped change my life in terms of the trajectory.
And then, okay, so and you're on the road for 60 days, which I guess was a bit of foreshadowing, because I have no idea, but just seeing your face all over the place, I'm guessing that you still travel a lot, and there were years where you traveled more often than not. How, I guess, when you made the decision, and I think in the early 2000s, then you started to, was it the NHL on NBC, things like that?
That started around I got offered the job in 04, right during the Tampa Bay Calgary Stanley Cup final.
Oh, that's when that was?
Yeah,
Okay.
they came up to me and they asked me if I thought I could broadcast a game from in between the two benches. I said, I know this is exact line. I said to Sam Flood, who was the producer of the NHL on NBC, one of the most creative men you'll ever meet. I said, I know I can do that, but there's no way the NHL or the coaches will ever allow it. He goes,
I couldn't believe it when I saw you there.
Yeah,
That's why I knew it was around that time.
You leave that to Dick Ebersol, who's a gigantic man in the broadcast business. You leave that to Dick Ebersol and I. If you think you can do it, you got the job. I said, I know I can do it. He goes, good, you got the job. And that's how it started.
I think that would have seemed really intriguing to me at the time, because, and by the way, I love how these things happen, but I'm not religious, but I believe in karma, and I guess I'm spiritual, and I don't really know. I'm not atheist, but whatever it is, I do believe that, you spread positive vibes and you're interested, and you meet people of the same ilk, because all these things, it's more than luck, but you find yourself having these career crossroads that put you in a great position. You just got to work hard and take it on. Now, this to me would have seemed really intriguing, because you can be a bit of an innovator. You're down there; it's the first time it's ever done. You're well versed in hockey. You've got Stanley Cup rings, so you're not intimidated by it all. I would have really, really welcomed that. Now, that started something new for you. Did that particular role, I guess, what was it as intriguing to you as it was to me, and how long did you do that for?
16 years I did it at the National Hockey League level, every Stanley Cup final, every All-Star game, the Olympics. We changed the rules for the Olympics, by the way, in 2006. Nobody's ever been allowed on the field to play. That's what they call it in the Olympics, whether it's a soccer field, whether it's a field hockey field, basketball court, hockey rink, you name it. Nobody's allowed to broadcast from the field of play. But
really?
Dick Ebbert, yeah, in 2006 in Italy, in Torino, they got the IOC to change the broadcast rules so that we could actually have broadcasters on the field of play. And so what that led to was in the Summer Olympics, I did water polo, and I was poolside. And water polo is just like hockey, except there's no ice. It's obviously you're swimming, but it's virtually the same type of ideology when it comes to creating offense and playing defense. And so that's how that whole thing started. And I'm so grateful for Mr. Ebersol and for Sam Flood. And that's how it all started, though. The 06 Olympic, people don't realize, but the IOC wouldn't let people on the field of play. And that's when it all started. And that's why you see announcers in major league dugouts now. You see analysts on NFL sidelines. You see all these, interviewers at NBA courtside now. That never used to exist. Hockey changed all that, and it was Sam Flood and Dick Ebersol, along with, I got to give him credit, Commissioner Bettman, for allowing it to happen.
I love that. That is unique to us, and I'm glad you were a part of it. And by extension, it's just coming to me now, but when did it start? Do you even know? A lot of people from other sports point some things out, and the two things that intrigue me the most that I don't even think about when I'm playing or when I'm watching is that they go, man, you guys like change while the play is going on. That's really wild. And I never ever even thought about it till these guys say it to me. I'm on a film set a lot now, I used to be surrounded with only hockey players, right? Now in the last 10 years, it's been all kinds of, so I'm usually explaining the rules to the football fans or whatever, or to the thespians or whoever. But another thing that they bring up, and they're like, hockey boy, they have those interviews during the game. And I'm like, don't they all? I guess they don't. It must have started somewhere. Foster Hewitt, or like, did Gordie Howe come out between periods and get interviewed like that?
No, I think they used to do that in the hallway, but we did it in the game. And here's one of the reasons.
I knew that. I knew
Here's
that.
how it started, Terry. It's a really good story. There was a lot of pushback from the coaches and the players about doing it during the game. So at one of the broadcast meetings, Sam Flood said to somebody that was in charge at the league office at the time, "Hey, we do NASCAR, and we do Formula One, and all these athletes, the car drivers, they're risking death every time they go out and perform their sport.
True.
They're not afraid to do an interview with us. Why wouldn't a hockey player or a hockey coach want to do it?" So it turned out to be really good. I won't tell you the coach, but I'll tell you a quick Sunday afternoon story from a major NHL rink in the United States.
Okay.
I go to do this interview, and the coach is really mad at his team. And so he considers me to be an extension of his team. And he goes, "Get the F away from me. I'm not doing this effing interview. My team stinks right now, and I got to get them refocused." So I had coached a lot against the guy, and I said to him very politely, I said, "Hey, how much do you make?" He goes, "Why is that relevant?" I go, "Because part of your salary is coming from what I do. So you're going to want to actually expose yourself and show people how really smart you are. So get off your derriere," I didn't say it that nicely, "and get with the interview." And he did do the interview, but my mic was open the whole time.
Oh, God.
Everybody in the truck, not on camera, because we used to tape those, because it would take place after the second TV timeout of each period. So in the truck, they're going, "Oh, man, I wouldn't want to have played for you. You were pretty hard on that
The
guy."
open mic. I bet you those guys tell the story at a campfire in the summer.
Oh, I bet they do, too. I bet they do, too.
I got to ask, so just got about 10 minutes left, if you don't mind.
No, I love it.
I remember seeing this live, and I can't remember the context, but PK Subban kissed you during an interview. I can't remember if he was just happy with you, if they just made the playoffs. I really enjoyed his enthusiasm and passion for the game, especially when I left Montreal. And I always, without getting into it, I still go back. Reggie Hull is great to me. I made a mistake. I didn't go back to camp, whatever. I didn't like Therrien, but part of me was there in Montreal still. That they treated me well, other than that guy. And again, no hard feelings or not. I really enjoyed, like, when I left, and then he came in, and I was like, okay, this guy's really passionate about the game as well. He used to score and go crazy. And, there was a period where I really, really tuned in just to watch the Canadiens because he was playing. And one time he gave you a big hug and kiss. It was after an interview, and I can't remember why. Can you give me some context?
Yeah, sure. I had done the entire Boston-Montreal series, and they had won, I think it was a Game 7. I'm pretty sure it was Game 7 in Boston. And at the end of the interview, PK just hugged me and kissed me. Now, it goes a long way back. I had done the World Junior a lot, 9 straight years, and PK was part of 2 really good World Junior teams. One of them was in Pardubice in the Czech Republic, where Canada won gold. He was not as important a player on that team as he was the next year in 2009 in Ottawa, where he was phenomenal. He was part of just a juggernaut of a Canadian team that beat Sweden in the gold medal game. And the attendance was phenomenal at that event. The TV ratings were off the charts, and PK was a big part of that. That was kind of his coming out party.
I see.
In terms of hockey. So we had a very good relationship, and we still do. I'll tell a tale out of school. This summer, I was in Montreal taking my 88-year-old mother out for dinner. She still lives in downtown Montreal by herself. And we were in a restaurant by her home, my wife and I and my mom, and all of a sudden this guy comes up and grabs my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's PK. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Well, I've been living here just hanging out. I make some charitable donations to the hospital, and I like to spend some time around the people here that I used to know." So he spends about 3 weeks or 4 weeks every summer around Montreal. We sat down. I think we had a glass of wine, and he left, and we exchanged numbers. Wow. But I've always had a good relationship with PK, always.
And I'm glad he goes back. Yeah, I honestly, I still go back. I love the city. I really, really I love it. I'm not exaggerating. I go to Old Montreal. I love all of it, but Old Montreal is so nice. It's just I don't know the word romantic or it's European. It's relaxing. It's got everything, and I really enjoy it. So I go back quite a bit, and I hear stories about PK more than anybody, and how he's charitable. And I like that
Oh,
because
he
it's not
gives it
just for the
back.
camera,
Yeah.
right? It's not just for the camera. He's not
No,
just
he
doing it
gives
for.
back. You know what? He's been a real good friend. He and I've gotten along for a real long time, like I said. And I like the way you just described old Montreal. There's a joie de vivre there, a joy of life that's pretty special. And old Montreal never gets old. As a kid that grew up in Montreal, I still go back to old Montreal a lot. It just never gets old. And the restaurant scene there is unbelievable. It's really good.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's like nothing else. And I love Newfoundland. I love our restaurant. It's a different culture. Like I said, I don't like to compare greatness, but there's something about going downtown. My favorite is still Gibby's in Old Montreal
Yeah.
Steakhouse. It's still there. And I love Weinstein and Gavino's up on Crescent Street.
Yeah, there you go. You're dating yourself now. You're dating yourself. I just like to go to George Street in St. John. So there you go.
Beautiful. I'm on the way there tonight. We got to skate every Friday at 12. This is again, I skate every single 6 days. Seventh is optional on Sunday, but all the ex pros and everything, we skate at noon. And that's when the growlers that were hurt would be on Tuesdays and Thursdays,
Yeah.
or guys getting back in the lineup. So that's half the reason I could play,
Yeah.
because I skate every day. So we go down on Fridays. We really look forward to it. We skate 12-1 at Patty Yetman Arena. Used to play in the AHL for Manitoba.
Yeah.
And Petty got the rink now and teaches kids. And we skate there, and we have a little bite to eat and head down over the hill, get there for happy hour, and start to watch some live music. I love it. Friday's our day.
That's
And
great.
love going to George Street. Listen, and speaking of the World Juniors, you mentioned that earlier. Like, obviously, it couldn't have been planned because it was so unique. But how many times a year or a day back then? But do you still hear people say double Dion? Because that's become a thing in most, like whenever anybody even close to resembles hitting someone and falling into somebody else, and that's people just pipe up, oh, the double Dion. Like, did you realize how quickly that would become iconic?
I didn't until probably 3 or 4 days afterwards because I kept seeing it
Yeah.
being played on reels. And remember, I don't think X existed then.
No.
Twitter did not exist
That's
then.
what's wild about it.
Yeah,
If it
that's what's
did, I
really,
mean,
really good about
who
it.
knows? It still
That was
went kind of
that was
viral.
in Grand Forks, North Dakota against the Russians. And Dion was so good in that World Junior. That was this really, people forget how good that World Junior team was because
They do.
that was the World Junior, Terry, where there was no hockey that winter.
Yeah.
And so all those kids, Dion was one of them, Patrice Bergeron was another, Brent Burns was another. You start looking at the team, most of those guys would have been in the NHL had there been NHL hockey. They wouldn't have been on that World Junior team.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to put in perspective for everybody, Sidney Crosby played on a line with Patrice Bergeron and Corey Perry. Now think about that for 1 second. Think about that. That's a line, Terry, in junior hockey.
In junior hockey.
In junior hockey, that was one of the lines. You look at the center ice position there: Clark MacArthur, Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, Ryan Getzlaff, Patrice Bergeron. That's junior hockey.
Yeah.
So that was the one. If you go look at the tapes, they beat up Ovi so bad. Ovi never finished the gold medal game. He was knocked out after the first period.
Interesting. You know what? I kind of want to go back and watch. I go back and watch like a lot of the 87 Canada Cup every year, but
Yeah.
I really, because a lot of people they take for granted how good that team was. Canada's it's all great. We've won in the past, and you see, the montage with the gold medals. But if you really break it down, that team was.
I think it's the best team that ever represented Canada at any level. Now, I've done the Olympics since 2002, and there's been some great Canadian teams. The 02 Canadian Olympic team was phenomenal. The 06 team wasn't as good. The 2010 team was really good. 2014 was off the charts. You can look at all these different teams, and you can look at all the good World Junior teams. I don't think there's ever been a better World Junior team that represented Canada, and a big reason why is because there was no NHL hockey, so all those kids were playing junior. But if you look at the pedigree of those players, most of them were from the 2003 draft. Terry, it's not even close. It's the best NHL draft ever. Marc-Andre Fleury's still playing. He was first overall. Joe Pavelski just retired. He was 205th. Like, if you go look at some of the players that were, but Bergeron was a second-round pick. Shea Weber was a second-round pick. You know, Shea Weber was
Yeah.
on that World Junior team. Like, you go look at some of the guys that were there. It'll rock your world.
Not just NHLers, but stars.
Yep.
And speaking of that, my big year in junior, which is funny looking back, because it was the same thing. It was the World Juniors were in Red Deer. I had 50 goals in my Damon Lankow led the league in scoring.
Yeah.
Mark Savard led the O in scoring. Christian Dubé, the Q. Lanks, 3 guys in their draft years, which is rare. I don't know. I've never looked into it, but that's got to be a rare thing. All led the league in scoring. I have my best year. And we're like, there's no chance, because it was a lockout. Like, you know, O'Neill came back, and Alexander Daig, and you know, Friesen and Ryan Smith, and all. We were just like, there's absolutely no chance. So we just we watched. We even went and watched a little bit of it in Red Deer. I remember just as huge fans, knowing that any other year we're at least at camp knocking on the door, right?
Wasn't that a Todd Harvey? Wasn't Todd Harvey a big? Yeah, Todd Harvey was big at that Red Deer. I remember that.
He was, yeah.
Todd Harvey story for you. We're over in Sweden when I was working for Ottawa the second time around, so 3 or 4 years ago, and scouting different players, obviously. And I knew Todd as a player. I didn't know him as a hockey executive. That guy cares so much. He's a worker. And we were comparing notes one night in the lobby of the hotel, and I was like, wow, what a future this guy has in hockey if he wants to do it. His passion, his ability to break players down, I was really impressed. And I was like, this is totally different than the player that I knew. Because I know. And you know what? Maniac when he played. You know,
and he's scout now. I ran into him in Montreal at a restaurant in happy hour. He had his hat down. TR, go on over. I go over. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm going to Oshawa tomorrow. I'm scouting a game. I forget who he's scouting for. Still really involved.
Yep.
And I see him at a lot of the we do a lot of these fundraisers. I love it. It's a great way to make a buck, right? You get paid to come into these events. They make 10 times more than, you know, everybody wins kind of thing. And a lot of us go and spend these weekends. You know, I'm doing Hockey Helps the Homeless next week in Halifax. And Todd is at a lot of these. And you're right. On the ice, I played one shift against him. He came up to me. He skated up. And he looks over and he was with the Rangers. And he goes, hey, hey, you're from Newfoundland, eh? He goes, yeah, my in-laws are from Bell Island. Can you believe it? I go, no. We should fight right off the bat. We both need a fight. And he goes, we're both pretty. And we went back and forth. We went at it and have been friends ever since. I love his passion for the game. Yeah. And he's a loyal person. Like, it didn't surprise me at all that he was captain after meeting him for 5 minutes. You know,
I'm a big fan. But that night we were actually in Stockholm that night. We were for sure. I was blown away by just his passion, his information, and his ability to break players down. It was really impressive. And I believe he's still working for Vancouver.
I guess it's Vancouver. Yeah, it was lost on me. It was happy hour. I'd had a few drinks. Okay, I just got a few more questions. Rapid fire randoms.
Fire away.
Okay, here we go. Rapid fire randoms with Pierre McGuire. Favorite athlete outside of hockey? Ever. It doesn't have to be current, but it could be.
Fran Tarkenton.
Wow.
He was a great football player, amazing quarterback, undersized, played for the Vikings and the Giants. He was an amazing, amazing football player.
I've heard the name, and it didn't click to me for a second there.
Yeah, Fran Tarkenton would be right at the top.
Great answer. You're Zach Hyman. Someone says right now, here, you're going to get 30 goals this year. Do you take it or leave it?
Take it.
How do you prepare for a game as a broadcaster, say? You know, you're going to do your thing in between the benches. How do you prepare for that?
4 hours of prep before every game, not counting the games that I watch both teams play.
4 hours. And do you go over pronunciations of names?
Yes.
You do? Okay, because a lot of people don't, and they think it's cute. And I'm like, if it was my name and I was over in Sweden or somewhere playing, I would want people to say Ryan. I just say the word. And I know sometimes it's funny. Don Cherry got a free pass for years, but I'm just curious on that. I'm like, you know, because there's a lot to break down. Yeah. But names are important to me.
I learned that from Dave Hodge and Gord Miller. They both taught me that about how to be a professional broadcaster when it comes to name pronunciation. So I really appreciated that.
Okay, good. I always wondered that. And those guys are known for being prepared. Realistically here, the Habs, if they don't make the playoffs next year, is that a disappointment?
Yes.
I agree. If you had one superpower, what would you pick?
Make sure there's no war in the world.
Great answer. These are knocking a lot of the other ones off the charts. What goes on a perfect pizza?
Green peppers, mushrooms, and pepperoni.
Death row. You're on death row. You've just committed a heinous crime and you're in Texas. And now, whatever it is, you are on death row. You've got 1 day left. What's your meal going to be?
Big ribeye steak, French fries that are crispy, mushrooms, and broccoli.
Good answer. Your favorite sports jersey outside of hockey, say?
Oh, outside of hockey, New York Giants football.
If I had said leave hockey in, what would it be?
Montreal Canadiens.
Nice. In this hypothetical world, you're flying to Mars. You're going to go to Mars and back. It's a 3-month trip in this spaceship that we have. Now you got to pick. It doesn't have to be someone that we know, but you got to pick a friend or someone you've come across that you know rather intimately to be DJ for the trip.
It would be my wife, who's an amazing music person, and she's really good with that. So it'd be my wife, believe it or not.
Now, if you could take, let's say your wife's not there, and you're going on a second trip, and you could take only 3 albums, what would they be?
One would be Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen for sure.
Great album.
Something from Jason Aldean. I don't know the names of the albums, and something from Chris Stapleton.
Great answers. I love music in most of its forms, and so it'd take a lot for me to say bad answer there. It's all subjective, but I like all 3 artists a lot. What goes on a perfect burger?
Nothing, just American cheese.
Beautiful. Okay, it's an all-time team. Okay, now you and I are going against each other. You don't know what my team is. It's irrelevant. In this hypothetical world, everybody is in their prime. They're 28 years old. Now you get to pick an all-time NHL team to compete against mine. 5 players and a goalie. And except in this world, you can't pick Gretzky, Lemieux, Howe, or any Montreal Canadiens.
Okay.
I'm taking those out because I think
I understand.
People would put those in first. So it's like Wheel of Fortune when they give you the RSTLNE or whatever, right? We're assuming that those people are going to be on the list, so now you got to fill it in otherwise.
Yeah, so I'll start with my goalie. It'd be Marty Brodeur. My defense would be Larry or Montreal. Does Larry count because he played in LA or could not count?
God, good question. Let's say no for the purposes of this because he's a Montreal legend.
Okay, fair.
And I love that you said Brodeur, by the way, because I used to sit with his grandfather at games when I sat out in Montreal, the photographer, and his son was playing the game. His son made a save on me last year in pro hockey.
That's good. So I'm going to take on defense. I'm going to take Christopher Pronger, who I coach as a 19-year-old and arguably one of the best shutdown defensemen ever.
Great.
And then I'm going to take Larry Murphy on the other side. I'm going to take a lefty and a righty. 2 puck movers. They'll be impossible to forward check, and they'll be real good at winning time. They both know how to win.
And left and right.
You talked about that 87 Canada Cup team, Terry. Go look at all the pictures of all the big goals. There's one guy that's always in the middle of those pictures. It's number 8, Larry Murphy.
Yeah. And
it's amazing. So I had the privilege of working with Murph and coaching him in Pittsburgh, and I can't say no. I think he's one of the most underappreciated big name players ever. I know he's in the Hall of Fame, but I'm telling you, he was a really good player.
I say the same. You don't hear his name anymore, and he was so magic out there, dynamite, so creative too. He's like Marner on the point or something.
Very much so. And then up front, I mean, just doing the wings. I can't take Montreal Canadiens, so I'm going to just make it. I'm going to take Phil Esposito down the middle because of all the points that he got.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Pavel Bure because of how electrifying he could be.
Electrifying. The agility, the speed.
Oh, man. Pavel was not enough love for Pavel Bure, how good he was in those prime, because he was playing in Vancouver. And back then, people, unless you lived in Vancouver, you weren't watching them play.
Oh, yeah. I would sit next to Valerie in Montreal, and he would tell me stories. I was on the edge of my seat.
I'm trying to think of another really good one. I'm going to take Connor McDavid as my other.
There you go. Beautiful player. And hopefully, I really, really, I got nothing against Florida at all, but I wanted to see him win one because it's harder and harder, right? People are compared by cups, and I'm like, come on, there was 6 teams. I used to go into the Montreal dressing room and it'd be like, oh my God, this guy got 8 Stanley Cups.
Well, you
How
see
did they-
Yvonne Cornway. When you saw Yvonne Cornway, be like, oh man, like
He was my assistant coach. Him
I
and
know
Steve Shutt.
that's why I'm bringing it up. Like you got.
Oh God, I was like, what? And he'd go and he'd do something, and I'm serious. Like more than once, he's like, maybe you should do this, and he wanted me to use or wanted me is, but me and Tucker were in Valerie, like we were all in Black Aces kind of thing for a time, and he was doing these things, and he was going, yeah, you should use a straight stick. It's a better back, and I'm going. Like you're Yvonne Cormier, like you got to work with me here. Like I can't because I can't do that. And the things that you did out there, you're trying to explain it to us like it's just point A to point B, and it's not.
When I was a kid growing up in Montreal, I saw him make a play once coming down the right side. He was carrying the puck on his left side, and he flipped it over to his right side and still shot it with the same dexterity. It was unbelievable in an NHL game.
Can't believe you're saying it, that he would do that in practice. I don't know. He had white hair. He must have been 60 at the time. I don't know, 55, 60, and he would still come out, and we would do like 3-on-3 at the end. And if we needed a player or something, he used to love it like that. That's the way they would bag skate us, which I loved because we would go hard. We didn't skate the lines, but we'd often go for like an hour and a half afterwards. Yeah, you guys go. We're going to grind you down. I loved it. But he'd be mid playing and flip his stick over, and I'm going, it was unbelievable. Wow.
I saw him do that in an NHL game, Terry. I was like, are you kidding? I was a kid. I was in the standing room. I think standing room tickets back then were $1 at the Forum, like $1.
Unreal.
And I saw him do that. I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And you try that at home, and you're like, no way, I can't.
It's insane. And I wish we had more footage. I say to people, like, you look at it and people cast it off. There's not as much footage. It's black and white. But I'm like, it was wild for me to see this guy who was well beyond his playing years doing this stuff. It must have been, like now they film every warm up. You can just imagine how much more we would appreciate those players. But we'll have to leave it at that, Pierre, because I got to take off and play my noon hour hockey and then pick up my daughter for her provincial team tryouts. Do you have anything else? Soccer. Do you have anything else to promote or say before we get going here?
I just want to thank you for your time. I've had a delightful time speaking with you, Terry. Really proud of you, too. What you've done with your post-hockey life, good for you. Really, congratulations.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I've always looked up to you, and keep going. And I hope this is not the last time we cross paths. I'm sure it won't be.
Oh, no. I'll come out there to George Street and hang with you guys. I still think I can get after it a little bit.
I know you could, and I'm waiting. You know who would love that? My father and 3 of us could sit down and have a grand conversation.
Done deal. We'll make that work at some point. Thanks, Terry. I really appreciate it. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. You too, buddy. And don't be a stranger. Talk soon. See you, Pierre. There he is, folks. Pierre McGuire, legend and all-round hockey guy, interesting guy, to say the very least. And I was sitting on that for about 6 months. I went on and did their podcast, and Pierre was nice enough to have me on after my Growlers game. And I said, you know what? He offered to be on mine, and I said, yeah, I'm going to save that for a rainy day, and it's literally a rainy day. Listen, if you're downtown St. John's, you want to go out, you want to hit George Street, here's the places I would go. The Bull and Barrel, Trinity Pub, Rob Roy Confusion, Greensleeves, and, of course, the Martini Bar. If I was going to go for a bite to eat, I would go to the Loose Tie, Blue on Water, of course, Wedgwood Cafe, who also do catering on Elizabeth Avenue, Peter Wedgwood at Wedgwood Cafe. Ryan Powers, the best young up-and-coming trainer that I know, great hockey player, great guy, trains Alex Newhook, Maggie Connors of Toronto and the PWHL, and more, and just a great friend. Go to Ryan Power Conditioning, strength and balance for the body and mind. If you want to go to Mr. Lube, there are 2 locations in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. One's on Torbay Road, one's on Kmart Road. Live, laugh, lube! Pitbull Pain Relief. The pain sticks, just don't quit. Go to pitbullpainrelief.com, see what all the fuss is about. And, of course, True Hockey. Take what's yours. Folks, I'll be back in just a couple of days with more Tales with TR. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to Pierre McGuire.